just have a majority of 100. That would be a nightmare for you, wouldn't it, as the acting returning officer?
Well, I suppose a nightmare is something that's outside your control, so yes, it would be in that sense, but I don't believe it will.
Right. I think this is also an historic by-election in the sense that for the first time overseas voters have been casting their votes. Now, I think they vote by proxy, don't they?
Yes, they do, and the total number, although it's historic, as you say, in principle, the total number is only just over 60. So against an electorate of 63,000, it's not especially significant, but it's certainly new for us.
Mr. Hopkins, thank you very much indeed. Mr. Hopkins, the acting returning officer for the Ribble Valley Borough Council, and as he says, he's hoping that the result will be announced here at about 1:30.
Nick, thank you very much. Nick Jones reporting from there, and 1:30, 25 minutes from now, we hope we'll get something. Well, if it's true, as we're saying, that the Liberal Democrats have taken this, it's not much of a birthday cake for the Prime Minister on what is now his 101st day in office. And the question is, what effect John Major has had on this by-election, but also what kind of effect he's having on the electorate, and what the Tories make of it, and what the Tory chairman makes of it. But it's 100 days since he replaced Margaret Thatcher, and Mark Mardell has been looking at how the Conservative Party has got on under its new leader. Just let's have a look at this. Mark Mardell reporting.
Would my right honourable friend agree with me that under his outstanding leadership... We have become a united party determined to defeat inflation and the party opposite when the general election comes.
It's not just bluster. When Mr Major took over, many Conservative MPs were publicly jubilant, but privately concerned that his lack of sparkle would damage their hopes of being re-elected. While pessimism about the result of a general election remains, a war has reassured most Tory MPs that the tone is absolutely right. He may not have sartorial style, some of his phrases are rather odd.
This will give me cabinet authority of a sort. Just wait till we discuss public expenditure next year.
But at least according to the opinion polls, people seem to like what they see. Labour feel that's just by contrast to what went before.
I think he's a very different kind of personality from Mrs Thatcher. Frankly, a much nicer person. I think that everyone would recognise that the Prime Minister has acquitted himself well in his involvement in the Gulf War and those matters. But in terms of the important issues of policy here in Britain, there's been an absolute vacuum.
Conservatives, sad to see the back of Mrs Thatcher, are worried about that vacuum as well. Billed as her man, Mr Major has disappointed some of her more ardent admirers. The Prime Minister's evident chumminess with Mrs Thatcher's European foes deeply disturbs some MPs. And the party chairman's speeches about the social market are seen as loose talk by others. It may be a clever double bluff, a softer image, the same policies. But ministers are nervously waiting to see what the Prime Minister and Mr Patten do with their ideas for the Conservative manifesto. Some hope the Radicals will be disappointed.
Reform there must be, and there will be, but it won't be at the same frenetic pace as we've had over the last 5 years. That's, I think, going to be the difference, and I've got a feeling the Conservative Party will respond to that, because it wants to continue being a radical party, but it also, I think, has an instinctive feeling that there comes a time when the public have taken about as much change as can be reasonably accommodated.
But Mr Major's most immediate worry will be what to do about the poll tax. He knows that, plus the state of the economy, will probably decide the outcome of the next general election. With even optimistic Tories saying that they'll probably scrape back in with a slender majority, Mr Major, a clever and cautious politician, will be picking his timing very carefully indeed.
Mark Mardell was reporting there. Well, now, Peter Kellner, what do the polls show about John Major in this 101 days?
The polls have been remarkably consistent. Yesterday's Daily Telegraph had a Gallup poll showing that he was more popular after his 100 days of leadership than Mrs Thatcher or Mr Heath were after their equivalent's time in Downing Street. And it bears out what NOP have found for the BBC and the Independent, what Norrie have found for the Sunday Times, that John Major is seen as moderate when Mrs Thatcher was seen as extreme. He's seen as in touch with ordinary people where she was seen as out of touch. He's seen as trustworthy where she was to some extent seen as untrustworthy. And in that Gallup poll in yesterday's Telegraph, Mr Major clearly led Mr Kinnock as the person people wanted as Prime Minister when they were choosing between people rather than between parties, whereas in her dying months as Prime Minister, Mrs Thatcher lags clearly behind Mr Kinnock.
So why does none of that come through in today's ballot?
I think there are two answers. One is a general answer which doesn't just apply to by-elections, which is the British system of the contest between parties, not between leaders. In 1979, Mr Callaghan was a lot more popular than Mrs Thatcher. The Labour lost the election and the Conservatives won. And there's a specific answer to by-elections, which was, as we said earlier, this was very much more a referendum on the poll tax and not about the personal qualities of the Prime Minister.
But will it stand him in good stead when it comes to a general election? Because we heard the Conservatives say in that film, at least there's none of that bloody woman factor, as there was at Eastbourne. He was already saying that they were better off with John Major.
I have to say that amongst political commentators and analysts, I'm in a very small minority in believing that Conservatives may not benefit to any great extent in the next election of Mr Major rather than Mrs Thatcher, except to the one important extent that it may be only through Mrs Thatcher going that they change the policy on the poll.
You're lined up with Neil Kinnock, who thought it was a mistake to get rid of her, as
and with Mr Tebbit, if I can choose my companions impartially.
For yourself.
If one goes back to 1945, Winston Churchill was an amazingly popular personal figure. It didn't stop the Conservative Party going down to their worst defeat this century. And Mrs Thatcher does have the record over the last 3 general elections of winning very substantial victories. I think the jury's out on whether at the next election Mr Major will prove a more effective vote for the Conservatives than Mrs Thatcher would have done. I don't think you can say absolutely for certain one way or the other.
Do you think you can say, Chris Patton?
Well, I'd be delighted if John Major wins as many elections as Margaret Thatcher won. That goes without saying. But I do think it's important to note that what the opinion polls tell us about John Major's tremendous popularity, and it's pretty well unprecedented in the polls, the levels which he's hitting, as well as the polls, that's something that comes across on the doorstep. And it comes across from Labour voters and Liberal voters and floating voters, as well as Conservative voters. People plainly think that he's an extremely decent, quiet, intelligent, authoritative man, and they like his style of leadership. Now, Peter may be right that that doesn't immediately translate into voting intentions or voting figures in a general election, but it's obviously the case that you're better off if you're a political leader being popular than being unpopular. And I don't think we'll have any great embarrassment come the next election campaign in seeing John Major in a runoff against Neil Kinnock, whose figures are candidly not terribly good, even though we're at the bottom of a recession.
Except that John Major is untested, isn't he, in the sense that he's not had to face the really tough decisions. He's had a war where we were in close alliance.
Quite a tough decision.
Where Mrs Thatcher, Thatcher had decided we would be in our traditional alliance with the United States.
Let me just make a serious point about that. John Major and I, and Jack and others, belong to the first generation this century which hasn't actually had to fight a war. It therefore puts a particular responsibility on people of our generation to have to commit other young men and women to battle. And I think that is a very heavy burden, and one that John Major discharged with commendable skill and style. And I think that plainly what people very much liked about him was the candour, the straightforwardness, the tone of the leadership he gave during the Gulf conflict. The way he leant over backwards not to exploit any of the difficulties in the Labour Party, because what he wanted to see was united House of Commons support for our servicemen and women in the Gulf.
Let's just stick with people, because it's important for a moment, Jack Cunningham. Kinnock against Major as opposed to Kinnock against Thatcher. Easier or harder for Labour?
I think it's too soon to say. It was a quite unique achievement for Neil Kinnock to achieve higher popularity ratings as a leader of the opposition against Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. That's very unusual for that to occur. The norm, as Peter Kellner has rightly said, is that incumbent prime ministers are usually far more popular with the electors than leaders of the opposition. That was certainly true when James Callaghan was Prime Minister. He was enormously more popular than Margaret Thatcher, but his popularity on its own wasn't enough to win Labour the general election. So I don't think we can read too much into that. I think that what we are seeing, and this is the first electoral test, I think a more important one will come on the 2nd of May, what we're seeing is that, for the moment at least, in this by-election the fact that Mrs. Thatcher, who was pretty widely disliked and people had had enough of her, has gone, but Mr. Major coming along hasn't saved the Tories because it's the policies which are so deeply unpopular, in this case a particular policy, the poll tax. So nice new John Major coming along has made no difference to that. Indeed, people may be angry in a different way, because at the time of the leadership battle, when Margaret Thatcher was forced out of office by the Tory party in their panic to get rid of her, there were promises made about something being done about the poll tax, and what we see now is that they simply can't agree amongst themselves what they should do. So I don't think that John Major's personal popularity is going to cover up or paper over the cracks and policy failures in the Tory government.
But the flaw in that argument is that if they do get a new policy instead of the poll tax successfully through, they're left with nice, shiny John Major, as you call him, and then they have got a lead.
I don't think that people are easily going to forget what the Tories have inflicted upon them. You know, I don't think
that's a slightly different argument.
It's an important argument. I mean, are people going to forget that this government, against all rational advice and opinion, inflicted the poll tax on them? Because whatever they may announce before the 2nd of May, poll tax is still going to be in place when the next general election comes along. It will endure throughout the coming financial year, and will still be in place. People will still be getting poll tax bills, and they will rightly, as Michael Heseltine graphically said, blame the Tories. It's a Tory tax. And so people aren't going to forget it, and it's not easily going to go away or leave their memories. And the Tories, on their own, are uniquely responsible for the damage this has done to family life, to services, and to the economy.
Des Wilson, just stick with people for a moment. Your leader has had, by all the polls, a good war, and has been generally admired for the position he's taken up in it. Is between the three leaders, is it going to be a sort of beauty contest for the electorate, and is your man going to stand a better chance of attracting people than Neil Kinnock?
I've always felt he's going to be the most effective campaigning leader in the general election. I think that John Major, affable and likeable undoubtedly, and benefiting enormously from the thank God she's gone factor, will not necessarily be as evocative of support in the general election in election circumstances as he is operating from Downing Street. Neil Kinnock really will be old news by the next election. The fresh face, the person who I believe people will want to listen to, is Paddy Ashton. Now, Jack Cunningham did not mention the latest poll, which involved all three leaders, which showed that Paddy Ashdown's standing was now ahead of Neil Kinnock's. I believe that the problem that we've had in our party is knowing the qualities of Paddy Ashdown, but not getting the media coverage in order that people could see him in action. We thought that might not happen until the general election. Because of the Gulf War, he was projected into the limelight in a way that people could hear him and see him. And the results, you've acknowledged yourself, David, in speaking about him, are reflected in public acclaim, in the rise in his position in the opinion polls. And I think that he is going to be a major factor in the general election, and look forward enormously to organising a campaign that gives him the opportunity to show what he's made of.
Right, we're going to go up, I want to put a point about that, but we're going to go up to Ribble Valley again, because the Conservative candidate, rather surprisingly, has agreed to give an interview to Nick Jones before the results come out. So let's go up there right away. Nick.
Yes, we are expecting the results in about 10 minutes, about a quarter of an hour's time. As you say, Nigel Evans, who was fighting this constituency, which does have this 19,000 majority, and at the start of the campaign had seemed, I think, a pretty clear favourite, has agreed to have a word with us about the indications now that the Liberal Democrats could have seized this constituency in this by-election with a majority of up to 4,000. That's the figure that people are putting on here as the likely Liberal Democrat majority. Nigel Evans, do you think that that could possibly be correct? That
we'll wait and see. I'm an old hand at by-elections. I've held that at Mid-Stamps and Eastbourne, and I've seen unlikely results becoming likely results, but I think we can wait 10 minutes or 15 minutes to find out what's going to happen.
But the indications are that your vote does seem to have collapsed in quite a dramatic way.
Well, I think the Labour Party's vote has probably collapsed more than our vote has collapsed, and switched across perhaps to the Liberal Democrats as a protest.
That sounds as if you accept that the Liberal Democrats have done very well.
Oh, I accept the Liberal Democrats have done very well, yes.
Do you think they've taken the seat?
I don't know. We'll wait quarter of an hour and see what's going to happen.
What do you think it was then? You said yourself, I think, that it was poll tax, poll tax, poll tax. This by-election's become almost a referendum.
Actually, I didn't say poll tax, poll tax, poll tax, but everybody else did. Yes, there's no doubt at all that that was the major issue of this campaign. I try to get across during the campaign that the government is having a review, and I think we got that across, but the public have obviously held their, or reserved their judgment on exactly what the government's going to do. We've got the rebate scheme that's coming in this April, and it's a shame really that people's poll tax bills hadn't come through their letterboxes to see how much people would have benefited from the rebate scheme.
Now, that I think was going to mean, wasn't it, help for something like 80% of the people up here.
That's right, and it will do. And it will do, and it'll be coming through this April. People don't have to claim it. And those people who were paying low rates before, and you must remember that many people living in the Ribble Valley were paying 120 and 150 pounds old rates before, and then all of a sudden found themselves paying 700 and 1,000 pounds in community charge. The community charge reduction scheme has been targeted directly at people in the Ribble Valley.
Were you undermined, though, by the reports of continued indecision in the cabinet as to what to do?
No, the review is going on, and I agree with the government that they want to get it right this time and not just fast.
Now, there's no doubt about it that you seem to have been a very efficient and effective by-election candidate for the Conservatives.
Thank you.
Well, in the sense that you've not run into some of the problems that candidates can face in a by-election.
We've run a very good campaign here. There's no doubt about that at all. We've had the best campaign as far as I'm concerned, the best literature. We've had many people from all over the country coming to help us in this campaign. It may not have been translated into the votes that we wanted to have seen tonight, but certainly I think that we have held the best campaign, and we can hold our heads high tonight, whatever the result is.
Now, you've got a little bit of stick for being someone who I think has roots closer to the Rhondda Valley than to the Ribble Valley. What did you feel about that campaign against you, being a Welshman here up in Lancashire?
Well, I've got to say that the campaign has mainly been run by the Liberal Democrats, and I feel rather sad. Sad that they've run that sort of campaign, because it's quite hypocritical for them to do so when they've had people like Roy Jenkins, a Welshman, who has held a seat in England, has held a seat in Scotland, but never a seat in Wales. At the general election, they've got a chap called Gwenoro Jones, born in Swansea, and lives in Swansea and is fighting Hereford for them at the next election. And they've got people from all over the country fighting seats all over the country. It's a little hypocritical for them at this juncture to say local, local, local.
Now, you've bought a house up here. You say you're going to live here?
I haven't bought it. I'm living in a house up here, and I will say that I will be moving into the constituency full-time.
Will you fight it again, though, if you don't manage to pull it off?
Well, that's very much up to the local association. As the local association selected me in the first place, I very much hope that the local association will select me again, but I will not prejudge their decision.
Because it would seem, wouldn't it, that if you were prepared to stick it out and you were accepted again, that you might have a good chance of taking this and keeping the seat at a general election.
From what I can read, and several people on the doorstep said to me, well, listen, we're going to give the government a bit of a kick this time, but we'll vote Tory next time. And you find that at by-elections, people can vote whatever way they like, safe in the knowledge that John Major will still be Prime Minister tomorrow morning and the Conservative Party will still be in government.
Nigel Evans, thank you indeed for talking to us this evening. We, I think, are returning now to the studio in London. We're expecting the result here in about 10 minutes' time. The hall here, this is the St Thomas Library, has filled up in the last half an hour with the candidates and all their helpers. We can see there the officers of the council. We can also see Mr Hopkins there. He's the man I was speaking to from the local council. He's the chief executive, and he's been the acting returning officer. We can also see, I think, some of the other fringe candidates in the background. But now I think we'll go back to London and to David Dimbleby.
Leaving the fringe to take care of itself. Thank you, Nick Jones. Was it a mistake, Chris Patten, in the circumstances, to choose for what is normally a very safe Conservative seat, so that the incumbent can expect to stay there for the whole of his political life, a man from Wales rather than a local man? It did obviously cause some upset at the beginning there.
Nigel was chosen by the local association from a large number of candidates who applied. They chose him because they believed him to be outstandingly the best and most able candidate. I know of no one who's been up to see the campaign who doesn't agree that he was a very, very good candidate indeed. I think in due course he will be a very good MP for Ribble Valley. And I repeat what we were saying earlier, that the Liberals did concentrate very largely on the fact that they thought it was intolerable that a Welshman should come up to Lancashire. But you've only got to translate the absurdity of that argument into large numbers of Liberal MPs and Liberal candidates to see what an underhand tactic it was. But nevertheless, there it is. Nigel may have suffered from it. I hope he hasn't.
Now, let's just go back to the leadership of the Conservative Party and the effect on the election. John Sargent, Mrs. Thatcher was talking about not a bad idea to have a matriarch behind the general election. Supposing she doesn't like what the new Tory party or the major-led Tory party does on poll tax. Supposing she doesn't like what was described in that film as Chris Patten being slightly softer, it seemed, and I left you deny that if it's untrue later on the economy. Would she stay in the House of Commons and cause trouble for the Conservatives? Is she a presence, as Geoffrey Archer was saying, a presence forever in the Conservative Party, or has she gone?
Well, some of her close followers, of course, would like her to be a presence, and they feel that she's in a lair and she can come out and frighten people over main issues. The people who are, though, close to her, and the people who I respect in terms of knowing what she might do, insist that she will not interfere, particularly with domestic politics. There was quite apparently a rather touching scene that Chris would know better than I would, but I've been told about, when the Cabinet gave her a leaving present, a pair of candlesticks. And Mrs. Thatcher was there, and Dennis Thatcher was there, and she said, we are going to be 100% loyal to John. And that was an absolute sort of firm commitment in front of the Cabinet that she would not, in fact, it was not her intention to rock the boat. She feels extremely bitter about the way that Ted Heath used his position as former Prime Minister. So in terms of what she wants to do in terms of her intention, it's quite clear. But of course, there are other people who then say, yes, but as long as they don't rub her nose in things. So I said to this particular person, well, what do you mean? Well, like over the community charge. So you've got an absolute stated firm policy from Mrs. Thatcher. You've got it, what appears to be quite clear. We thought that she was going to stand down and announce it to her local constituency association. We were then told that she hadn't decided. We were then told, and we're still being told, that she might step down if the election is delayed until next year. So you've got just that sort of fascinating possibility that if things became for her just too much and she just couldn't stand the change of direction, if it was too violent, then she is there. It's rather like someone was saying it's like the German Navy in the First World War. You know, after the Battle of Jutland, did they ever come out? But they were still a great potent force. You know, they were never used in battle again, but they were still intact.
And is John Major's popularity flash in the pan, novelty value, or does it give them an advantage over a Conservative Party led by Mrs. Thatcher in the election?
I think it gives them an enormous advantage in one sense, that one of the great slogans of politics is time for a change. And I think that the way that was affecting British politics was obvious to everyone at Westminster, and obviously particularly obvious in November. It is time for a change. Can they really go into a fourth term? Now, to achieve, with such relatively little bloodletting, a change at the top of the Conservative Party and offer a new promise, a new direction, was, I think, enormously important. The advantage he then had was that in the Gulf War he was seen as the way any Prime Minister would like to be seen, leading a popular cause, a very popular and dangerous cause. So the question now is, and we're still at the interim stage, can he then, with all that going for him and for his new cabinet, then achieve a sufficient level of we are the change, we are the radical alternative, we're the ones who got rid of Mrs. Thatcher? Can that be translated into votes? We don't know yet. I mean, that's intriguing, and that's the sort of strength of the argument.
I think, John, that depends on how quickly the recession is over. Well, the polling evidence is that the recession, the public blame Mrs. Thatcher for the recession, not Mr. Major, even though Mr. Major was Chancellor before that she was Secretary. If the recession bottoms out very soon, I think it will still remain in the public's mind. Mrs. Thatcher was the Prime Minister who was Britain to recession. Mr. Major is the Prime Minister who puts Britain out of recession. If over the recession drags on, unemployment continues to rise, perhaps mortgage rates don't come down quite as fast as people want, then I think Mr Major will start attracting some of the blame, and then his popularity might start to wear off. It really is in his interest to have good economic news and continuing good economic news through the spring.
We've talked about the Conservative Party quite a lot and about the leadership of the Conservative Party. We're still waiting for this result to come through from Ribble Valley. It should be through in a few moments. But I think perhaps we ought to turn to the intriguing role of the Liberal Democrats in all this, and whether they are simply a by-election party that does well in by-elections, or whether there's something substantial in what they've achieved, apparently, in Ribble Valley, and the damage that they appear to have done to Labour. We'll talk about that in a moment. We'll do it via Nick Jones, who's up there in Ribble Valley, and has with him the agent for the Liberal Democrats. Nick.
The Liberal Democrats do certainly seem to have been engaging, I think, here in Ribble Valley in some pretty astute by-election engineering. It was quite, I think, an operation to see what they were up to over the weekend, talking up their prospects. The media, I think, went along with the buzz story quite well, and I think it must obviously have done the Liberal Democrats a lot of good. With me is Graham Elson, the General Secretary of the Liberal Democrats. Mr. Elson, what do you put down to what looks like, certainly looking at the way it's going, what could be what? A majority for you here of 4,000? Is that really likely?
Yes, it's looking around about the sort of 4,000 figure, which is certainly a very, very good majority indeed. I'd put it down to an excellent candidate, a good campaign team, and lots of issues that we could get our teeth into.
You really think that you've seized Ribble Valley?
Oh yes, I think we have.
Without doubt?
Without doubt.
What do you put it down to in the sense that this was such a Tory stronghold, wasn't it? A 19,000 majority. You've obviously picked up the protest vote, but why have you been able to pick it up so quickly and so well?
Well, I think we've been able to pick it up quite clearly because the main issue here was the poll tax, and we are the only party that has been prepared to put forward a credible and fair alternative method of funding local government, which is local income tax. Neither the government, the Conservatives, or the official opposition Labour have actually got a proper worked out alternative policy to the poll tax. I would suggest to the government they better get moving fairly quickly, because the message from the people of Ribble Valley on behalf of the people of Britain is get rid of the poll tax, because if you don't, you do so at your peril.
But you are, it's said by the other parties, guilty of some pretty blatant tactics in the sense that you do try to talk up your chances, and it did seem to work on this occasion.
Oh, I think we, all the way through, have been campaigning in the first week to establish ourselves in clear second place, which we did, and thereafter to build on that and go for winning the seat, which we did.
Do you feel that this by-election is, what, one of a pair in the sense that it follows so close on the heels of Eastbourne? Do you think you're going to be able to repeat it if there were other by-elections?
Well, we hope so. We've now got a very, very good campaigning team within the party, which we've been building up very patiently over the last 18 months under the excellent leadership of Paddy Ashdown, and I think the team will have further successes in the months to come.
Labour put up what they believed was a very strong fight. Josie Farrington, their candidate, is a local county councillor. Why do you think it was that you were able, as it seems, to squeeze the Labour vote?
Oh, I think there was a lot of feeling and resentment here in this constituency that people have suffered at the hands of the Labour-controlled Lancashire County Council. And I think it was really a message of a plague on both the Conservatives and the Labour Party houses. And we put forward positive points of policy, positive alternative poll tax, and the people of this constituency responded. Clitheroe, I think, will kill off the poll tax.
Thank you, Graham Elson. That was Graham Elson, the General Secretary of the Liberal Democrats, saying that he's confident they've taken Ribble Valley with a majority of about 4,000. Back to you, David.
We shan't know the truth of it for another 5 or 10 minutes, I'm told. Now, Peter Kellner, it's time to make a bit of mischief here about the Liberal Democrats, I think. Would you explain what you think the Liberal Democrats have achieved here, and what it tells us about what they might do in a general election? And would you also explain to us what it tells us about Labour's chances in a general election? And then I'll ask our gentleman here to comment.
I broadly but not completely agree with what Chris Patton said, that by-elections are very different from general elections. In the last Parliament, we had a big Liberal victory in Rydale. A year later, a massive Conservative majority in the House of Commons. Rydale went back to the Conservatives. In the previous Parliament, we had a series of centre party gains. Crosby, Shirley Williams won, of a similar order of magnitude as we seem to be getting tonight. A famous by-election victory, following general election, big Tory victory. Crosby went back to the Conservatives. And equally for Labour, all the Tory seats in this Parliament there has been a squeeze on the third party. The Liberal Democrats got squeezed in Staffordshire and in the Vale of Glamorgan. Labour got squeezed at Eastbourne and here again in Ribble Valley. There appears to be, in by-elections at least, a substantial part of the anti-Conservative vote, which will simply trump whichever party looks like having the best chance of toppling the Conservatives.
So it all hangs on opinion polls? It all hangs on what the opinion polls in the local press say in the day or two before the election?
No, it didn't in Eastbourne. From memory...
Well, there wasn't much of a Labour vote in Eastbourne,
but there weren't any opinion polls in Eastbourne. There wasn't an opinion poll in Penrith after the 1983 election, when the Liberals came within 500 votes of taking Willie Whitelaw's old seat. But yes, I'm sure it is true that the poll I wrote up for Wednesday's independence perhaps made it a bit clearer to some voters than it might otherwise have been clear that it was the Liberal Democrats who were the challengers and Labour was trailing in third place. But we didn't manufacture that fact. We reported a fact by getting NOP to go and ask to 800 people on the ground. We were the communicators of something that was already happening. But in as far as we communicated a clarity that was perhaps not there otherwise, yes, perhaps that poll report contributed to what happened.
What's the message for Labour?
I think the message for Labour is, firstly, it shouldn't worry too much about where it comes third and its vote gets squeezed. But nevertheless, where you've got the rival opposition party, which seems to be out of things nationally over the last couple of years, coming back into the frame, there's going to be nationally, I'm sure, in the next 2 or 3 weeks, an upsurge of Liberal Democratic support in the national polls. It always happens after famous centre party victories. And if the Liberal Democrats can capitalise on that, hold that game through to the May local elections, then it could perhaps build up a bit more of a bandwagon than it has in the past. But the one thing I would say where I disagree with Chris Patten, I largely agree with him, is this. The Conservative vote has fallen spectacularly during this campaign. Normally, opinion polls take place when people aren't that interested in politics. The particular thing about an election, by-election, general election, is that the voters are subjected to intensive campaigning. The Conservatives have had a chance to get across their message on the poll tax, on the economy, whatever they wanted to say, to the voters of Ribble Valley. And as they've got that message across, their voters drained away. And I think if, let us say in May, the local elections suggest a 3 or 4 point Conservative lead, the worry in the Conservative strategists' minds must be that they couldn't necessarily guarantee on holding that lead through a general election campaign. It seems to me the Tories have most to worry because their campaigning skills do not seem to have served them that well during the course of this by-election.
Right, well, wow. Let's start with Des Wilson.
Let's pick up that thing about intensive campaigning first of all, because one of the disadvantages we suffer between by-elections or between elections is we don't get the same media coverage. We get the attention, we are seen and heard in campaigning circumstances, and what happens? People come out and vote for us. That's the first point I'd like to make. But our party, which is a new party, went through 2 terrible years from 1987 to 1989. And then look what we've done over the last 2 years. Saw off the Greens, got rid of that passing phenomenon, finished off the Social Democrats, increased our position in the poll from a despairing 4% to 11% last Sunday. In January and February, 29% of the votes in local election polls. And we're situated, without any question at all, not only to hold the second place that we got in 230 seats at the last election, but on the basis of all the results we're getting at the moment, to move on and take some of it. So I make a prediction now. Peter lives in a world of statistics. We live in a world of actual voters, and they are voting for us. I'll make a prediction that we will actually increase our number of parliamentary seats at the general election, and that all of these statistics and everything that's been happening in British politics suggests that the party that should be panicking, the party that is in really serious trouble, and the party that is not going to make the kind of progress it wants at the general election is Labour.
But increase your number of seats to what are you talking about?
Well,
I'm not talking about a breakthrough by the Liberal Democrats.
David, I'm not going to sit here and suggest we're going to win the general election.
I rather thought that's what you were on the verge of doing.
No.
Breaking the mold.
No. I like, as in the case of this by-election, things to come as a surprise. But I'm not saying we're going to win the general election. We have always said we're on a long journey to power, and that the next election is a key staging post. We have to make progress at it, and everything we've done over the last 2 years can be summed up by one word: progress.
But if the message is that you're going to take votes and come in second place in a lot of seats, you're going to leave the Tories in power for another parliament as a result of this.
Possibly there could be a balance of power, but at the end of the day, our job is to go out there, win votes, win seats, and then do with the votes we're given given what we can. If there's a balance of power, we will use that influence. If there isn't a balance of power, we will use our improved base to go on and succeed later in the decade.
Just before I come to you, I'm told that we now have dramatic news, which is that they're on the verge of making this announcement, but that the returning officer wants the room reorganised before they do it. So while they shift the furniture, and goodness knows what they're shifting it for exactly, but anyway, while they shift the furniture and move the tables around, they obviously have the result. There we are. You see them hard at work still in Ribble Valley, reorganising the tables. Anyway, that means that we're 4 or 5 minutes away still. So, Jack Cunning, you have a moment or two.
Yes, I agree with Peter Kellner. One can't read too much into individual parliamentary by-election results. The Liberals won in Eastbourne. They had a blip in the polls, as he said, and it vanished almost without trace very soon afterwards. And that is almost certainly what's going to happen again, if, as seems likely, they have scored a spectacular victory here this evening in Ribble Valley. I don't agree with any of that stuff from Des Wilson. Of course, he's bound to say that, isn't he? Because they're struggling to get into double figures in national opinion polls. They may pick up 1 or 2 seats, but no one seriously believes that the Liberal Party is well placed to replace either Labour or Conservative in terms of parliamentary seats, or going to get anywhere near being able to form an alternative government. The only party in that position is the Labour Party, and we're very much in the running with the Conservatives.
Do they have weaknesses, the Labour Party, in terms of their geographical spread in the country, general election, that are revealed by this by-election?
Well, the oddity is that we think of British politics as being a divide between the Labour North and the Tory South, and yet here is Ribble Valley very much in the north of England, turning in a derisory Labour vote. But the truth has always been that it's not just been a north-south thing. It has been an urban-rural split, and that where Labour is strong in the north, as in Scotland, is very much in the urban and industrial belts. And Ribble Valley, to that extent, Ribble Valley is much more like Surrey or parts of
There are
Devon.
lots of strong Tory seats in the north. If one thinks of Hexham or Penrith and the border, I mean, my constituency is surrounded by strong Tory seats. Westmoreland and Lonsdale, massive Tory majorities. That's always been one of the myths, that the Tories never held any seats in the north. But they have some of their safest seats in the country
David,
are in the north of England. This is one of them.
The problem isn't really just the Labour Party. I think it's to do with the legitimacy of either a Labour or Conservative government at the moment, because of the geographical and social polarisation of British politics. It's very hard to see either a Labour government being able to speak for the whole of Great Britain, or a Conservative government speaking for the whole of Great Britain. We've already had the problem of Scottish politics, where you have 10 Conservative MPs out of 72. And if we have a Labour government after the last election, it'll be with perhaps a dozen Labour MPs covering the south of England outside London, where there are, 200 MPs. And I think there is actually a quite serious problem which cuts across partisan issues.
Can I just make a point here about this in the south?
Why should that actually matter, given that in any constituency you've got, almost half Labour, almost half Conservative? Why should it matter if they're not geographically evenly spread?
I don't think it matters necessarily in terms of the arithmetic. There's a separate point about the proportionality of representation.
But why does it matter in terms of legitimacy of a government?
I'll tell you why it matters, because my personal view is that it is important within any government that there are voices representing the interests of all types of community and all parts of the country. I think it is not good for the nature of a Conservative government that the Conservative voice from Scotland in Parliament is so weak. I don't think it would be good for the quality of a Labour government that the voice of Southern England outside London within the Labour representation in Parliament.
But you have to be a Prince of Wales man to change that and have PR. You can't do it any other way, can you?
No, Peter, this is just nonsense. You can't say that because the Conservatives win a minority of the seats in Scotland that they're not entitled to form a legitimate
I'm not saying you're not
government.
entitled to.
Well, you seem to be saying that.
Government.
I want to come back to the position in the South. It is clear that if Labour only gains seats in London and not elsewhere in the South, that we will not have a majority, and there's no point in denying that. We have to do better in the South East and the South West.
And Des Wilson talks about the last general election. In the European parliamentary elections, much closer than the last general election, and in local elections since, we've demonstrated that we are poised to win seats in places like Southampton and Plymouth and elsewhere. And that we must do, and I believe we will do, to win a general election whenever it comes.
Now, Chris Button, I think what he said, Mr. Kellner said, that is, Professor Kellner, about you, was that they weren't getting their message across. This was the danger for the Conservatives, and that this by-election showed it.
I think there are some messages which it's easier to get across than others, and plainly, we haven't had the greatest success in getting across the case for the community charge. I actually think that we fought a good campaign with a good candidate, and I don't think that if we have lost, while I must obviously take a share of the responsibility, I don't think it's been principally because of the way we've campaigned in the Ribble Valley. I think it's been more about the issues, or about one issue, as we've said throughout the discussion this evening.
But this one issue has set you back terribly, hasn't it? I mean, don't you rather wish it had never raised its head at all in the first place?
Well, what I wish is that we'd been able to hold the by-election after we'd concluded our review of the community charge. The fact of the matter is that we couldn't hold the by-election before the middle of February, because there's a convention that you don't, if you don't hold a by-election on an old register that close to a new register. And once the new register was in the middle of February, we had to hold the by-election within 3 or 4 weeks. So we effectively had a period from about the middle of February to the middle of March in order to respect the conventions. I think it would have been easier for us if we'd had the by-election after our review of the community charge was over. But that's life. I still think we had the community charge reduction scheme to sell, and I'm sorry that we didn't sell it perhaps effectively enough.
Has there ever been a cul-de-sac quite like this? The party has gone up and then had to turn around at the top and come all the way back down again and come out with new policies?
Oh, there are. If we do turn round in a cul-de-sac, there are many examples of governments having done that in the past. What is very important is that we should listen to what people are saying and react constructively.
Right, well, we can now go up to Ribble Valley to the count, because the candidate's just coming onto the platform there, so we may have the real result at last. Nick Jones.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Patrick Townsend, and I am Her Majesty's High Sheriff of Lancashire. And one of the ancient duties attached to that office is to act as the returning officer for parliamentary constituencies in the County Palatine, and therefore, of course, the Ribble Valley. Before declaring the result of the by-election, let me first explain what will happen immediately after the declaration. I shall invite the successful candidate to make a few brief words, and I shall then invite each of the unsuccessful candidates who so wish to exercise the same privilege, even more briefly, I hope. I know that the media and the press will be keen to interview candidates, but ask that, as a matter of courtesy, you wait until these brief speeches are over. I now come to the declaration. I, the undersigned, being the returning officer for the Ribble Valley constituency, hereby give notice that the total number of votes given for each candidate at the election was as follows. Brass David Anthony,
Independent Conservative,
611. Carr Michael,
Liberal Democrat,
22,377. Evans Nigel Martin,
Conservative,
17,776. $17,776. Farrington Josephine,
Labour,
4,356. Hughes, Stewart, Basil, 40.
Independent Looney.
60.
Thank you very much.
Ingham, Haldora, Goodrum.
Green Party.
466. St. Clair Lindy, known as Miss Whiplash, 72. Such, Lord David,
Official Looney.
278.
Thank you. Thank you, fans. Thank you very much. Thank you, fans.
Taylor, Simon Charles,
Liberal Party.
133. And that Michael Carr has been duly elected to serve as member for the said constituency.
Result from Ribble Valley, a Liberal Democrat gain, 22,377 for Michael Carr, a majority of 4,600 over the Conservatives at 17,776, the defeated candidate Nigel Evans. And so let's hear from Michael Carr, a 44-year-old schoolteacher with 7 children, a former councillor, stood here in 83 and 87, and has won on his 3rd try.
May I first of all thank the returning officer and his staff here tonight for the splendid way in which they have conducted the count, as always in Ribble Valley. May I also thank the polling clerks and the other staff and the police who have made sure that this by-election has run smoothly and without any hitches. May I now thank the people of Ribble Valley for electing me as their Member of Parliament. I'd like to say that I'm going to do my very best to represent all the people of Ribble Valley as well as I'm able. This victory for the Liberal Democrats tonight has put paid to the poll tax. If there was ever any doubt of the issue that was going to settle this by-election, then there is no doubt now. When poll tax is finally put to rest in the grave, its epitaph will read, "Here lies the poll tax, killed in Ribble Valley." Mr. Heseltine, Mr. Major, doubtless you're watching this proceedings now. You know what you have to do, or else you know what the electorate of this country will do to you in the general election.
Mr. Major, a red nose.
May I finally thank all the people, my agents, everybody else who's helped me to achieve this victory tonight. Thank you very much.
The victor, Michael Carr, the Liberal Democrat, and now the defeated Nigel Evans, the 33-year-old businessman from Wales, who fought Swansea West in the general election 87 and Pontypridd in 89 at a by-election and has been defeated here.
Can I first of all thank you, returning officer, and all those who were involved in officiating at this by-election campaign. And I'd also like to thank the police as well for all the work that they've done today. I'd like to thank my agent and all those members of the association who have helped me with their great support during the last 3.5 weeks. And the campaigning team, all of them, who have helped me during this campaign. I would also like to thank those people of the Ribble Valley who voted for me today. I thank each and every one of them. This obviously is not the result that we wanted. We know that. If there has been one issue which has been uppermost in everybody's minds during this campaign, it has been the community charge. We face the issue head on throughout this campaign. We know that there is a review going on, and that review will continue to go on. We fought this campaign on policies, and in defeat, we can hold our heads high. The government is listening and will continue to listen. A by-election factor has obviously been at play, and people feel that they can give the government a kick. But at the same time, tomorrow morning, the voters of the Ribble Valley are safe in the knowledge that John Major will still be Prime Minister and that the Conservative Party will still be in government. Because if there is one thing that I've heard on every doorstep, irrespective of what people's politics has been, it is that John Major is doing a fine job as Prime Minister. And I've got no doubts at all that at the general election, people will wish to see John Major and the Conservative government carry on. Thank you very much.
There will be no June election.
So let's just have a reminder of exactly what the vote was in Ribble Valley and the share and the change there. Here are the figures. Liberal Democrats 22,000, Conservatives 17,700, Labour third place 4,356, Independent Conservative, he was David Brass, a local greengrocer who was trying to challenge the choice of a Welshman for the constituency and also protesting against the poll tax, 611, and others 1,009. Incidentally, the Greens only got 466 in this constituency, on a fairly big turnout of 72% for a by-election. This was the share of the vote then. 49% for Liberal Democrats, 39%, 10% less for the Conservatives, 9% for Labour, 1% for the Independent Conservative, 1% for the others, and this is the change since the 1987 general election. An increase of 27% in the Liberal Democratic vote, a fall of 22% in the Conservative vote, a fall of 8% in the Labour vote, a 25% swing from Conservative to Liberal Democrat. And that's the score in a fairly sensational by-election result, of which we have at last had the final figures after a lot of speculation. Well, Chris Patton, what do you make of it all now?
Well, it's a disappointing result. It's a bad result for us. We've been dissecting the entrails of the exit poll, which it is remarkably accurate. I mean, pretty well spot on. And that will, I think, make us look at exit polls with great care in the future. I'm disappointed because we had a very good candidate, I think, and most people thought the best candidate in the field. We had a good team supporting him. We had a great deal of support from the parliamentary party and from the party right across the country, but we still lost in a very safe constituency. I think that does have messages for us about community charge. I've got no doubt about that at all. They're messages that we've already taken account of and are trying to address in Michael Heseltine's review. We'll be coming forward with the results from that review, as I said earlier, by the time of the local government elections. And plainly, given the result tonight, everybody, not least in Ribble Valley, will be interested in what we have to say.
Des Wilson?
Well, it's a magnificent result for us. It shows that when people get the chance to vote instead of talk to opinion polls, they will support us. It's a disaster for the Conservatives and for Labour. I think it's a triumph for Paddy Ashdown and his leadership over the last few weeks, a triumph for a very able candidate and campaign team. Obviously, it's a phenomenal result, and clearly I don't take from that what will happen in the general election, but I do take enormous encouragement. I think our party is now back in shape and really fit to fight an effective general election campaign. We can't do other than say that it's an exciting night for the Liberal Democrats.
Yeah,
calamitous defeat for the Tory in one of their dozen safest seats in the country, and congratulations to the Liberal Democrats. It's a pretty spectacular win for them. I've disappointed and particularly sad for Josie Farrington, an outstanding Labour candidate. Labour never had a strong base in this constituency. We were third in the last general election, we were third in the general election before that, and sadly, although we fought it hard, Josie's had the support of many of my colleagues in the Shadow Cabinet,
and a good campaign, we haven't made the headway that we would have wished. But I emphasise, I think this is a seat which is going to go back to the Tories at the general election, and it's a brief but transient fillip for the Liberals.
What do you think the Prime Minister will be making of it when he wakes up in the morning and gets the full details and sees what's happened in Ribble Valley?
Well, clearly it's a tremendous blow. The first electoral test, they did obviously not expect the community charge, the poll tax factor, to be so strong, so powerful. They did think that the transitional relief scheme that was introduced at great expense could have been explained, but the poll tax bills were not there in the voters' hands. So obviously the timing was important there. In terms of practical politics, though, I think its effect could be quite powerful. I think that Michael Heseltine might be thinking quietly in his home, this is actually quite good news. I want to put the knife to the poll tax. This will strengthen my arm. There is still a debate going on among senior Conservatives about how far they can cut loose from the poll tax, and this is just another encouragement to those forces. In terms of the general election timing, it doesn't mean that June is completely ruled out, but certainly the momentum has been halted for that June. It will slow down the excitement that was building up among some people. It will look as if it's better to wait. Certainly they will wait until they've made the poll tax announcement, which we can now expect before Easter, if not before, or leaks quite quickly, perhaps at the weekend, and then look very, very firmly and perhaps very sceptically at those May the 2nd results before Mr Major will make any decision at all about election. It certainly rules out what some people were thinking about was an election on May the 2nd, the same time as the local elections. I think we can say that has now been definitely ruled out.
We're waiting to hear from Michael Carr, the victor, up there, and we'll get to him as soon as we can. Peter Kellner.
There's something really very curious about the result. Now we have the details. This is the second worst Conservative performance in a Conservative seat since 1979. Only in Richmond in Yorkshire did the Conservative vote fall by a bigger percentage amount than the 22 percentage points that they fall in Ribble Valley. In some of the worst Tory performances in 1981, when they were losing Croydon and Crosby, they didn't fall as much as they've fallen here. And yet in past by-elections over the last 12 years, when the Conservatives have done badly, they've also been doing badly nationally. And the by-elections to some extent reflected, perhaps exaggerated that. Yet this by-election has taken place when the latest nationwide opinion poll, as Chris Patton said earlier, shows the Conservatives in an 8-point lead. The disparity between the national news and the by-election result, in my memory, has never been greater. And I think it's two things. The first is the peculiar power of the poll tax to cast an amazingly black shadow over the government. But secondly, is perhaps underlying this, the state of the economy. If it hadn't been for the Gulf War, if it hadn't been for the change of leadership, I think the Conservatives would be behind at the moment, and perhaps we're beginning to see that coming back. Perhaps normality is going to return, and in a recession, perhaps the Conservatives are not going to have such an easy time, even if they solve the poll tax issue over the next 2 or 3 months, as they looked as if they might have before tonight.
But is it something else? Is it that the electorate is getting used to using by-elections more than they have in the past to send messages?
Oh, to some extent that is true, but I don't think there's a new thing about using by-elections to send messages. It goes back 30 years. You can go back to Torrington in the late 1950s, the messages being sent through by-elections. Clearly, yes, that is true to some extent, but nevertheless, this enormous disparity between nationwide polls and this particular by-election result, I think, needs more explaining than just mid-term blues going on towards the end of the parliamentary term.
Well, I think one thing to remember about Ribble Valley is it's in a part of the country where there is a very large amount, or was a very large amount, of low rateable value accommodation. And therefore people did find themselves, with the community charge, facing much steeper bills than they'd been used to paying for their local services. We very much hoped, as Nigel Evans was saying in his speech, or in his interview, that the community charge reduction scheme would be able to get across and point out how it was going to help those people. But I think until they actually see the figures on the bottom of their bills, they're going to have difficulty believing in the generosity of the scheme. I think that was a real problem. But I repeat, it was an area of the country where the community charge had made a particularly substantial impact. And I guess that probably accounts, in the main, for the astonishing difference between tomorrow's opinion poll, or today's opinion poll, in the Daily Telegraph,
and a result here which is very bad for us.
How many of your marginals are places like that which have been badly hurt by poll tax, particularly badly hurt?
Well, it's a factor in Lancashire, it's a factor in the West Midlands, and a number of seats as well. It's obviously an issue which has concerned a large number of my colleagues. Any general election is won in those critical marginal seats. It's very important, and it would be rather comfortable, speaking as a member of a marginal group.
So how long are we going to be? We have Michael Carr, the successful Liberal victor in a scrum here in Ribble Valley in the Lancashire Hill Country. Well, it's a sensational victory, Michael Carr.
It is indeed, yes. We've worked hard for it, though. We planned for a campaign that was going to take us to this victory.
What do you think it was? Was it the poll tax? That's what people said on the doorsteps, it seemed.
Yes, indeed, that was the principal issue. We've had hundreds of letters from people. We've talked to thousands of people during the election campaign, people living in villages, in small cottages that used to pay £180 a year in rates and then found themselves paying 3 times as much from the poll tax. They're sick and fed up of it. The message really does have to go from here to the government. If you want to stay in power, or if you want to have a chance of staying in power at the next general election, you know what you've got to do.
Do you think, though, that you're going to be able to hang on to this seat if it came to a general election? Isn't it just a protest vote?
Indeed not. There was some very positive support from people when we put to them our alternatives to the poll tax. Indeed, we're the only party who've actually worked it out and been prepared to put figures to people. And despite campaigns to discredit those, people looked at them and it registered. It's a fair system.
It seemed as though the campaign really started swinging your way last weekend. That was when the opinion polls came out, wasn't it?
Well, that's when you people noticed it swinging our way. We picked it up 2 weeks earlier than that.
Do you feel that the fact, though, that you squeezed the Labour vote as well as the Tory vote, do you think that that does mean this is going to be a long-term safe seat for the Liberal Democrats? It would seem to be a very short-lived affair.
Well, you may feel that. We feel that we have a lot of work to do, and we shall build on the work that we've already started here, and we shall fight hard to retain the seat.
A sensational victory, though, what? One of the most sensational Liberal by-election victories, what, for a decade?
Well, you're telling me.
It's a 25% swing.
Well, that's tremendous, yes. Yes, I haven't looked at the figures and analysed them. I know what my majority is. It's great.
Mike Carr, thank you very much indeed. Back to you, David.
Thank you very much. Des Wilson.
David, the first point I want to make, we keep hearing about how by-elections are special and it'll all be turned over to the general election. I can think off the top of my head of David Steele, Alan Beath, Richard Livesey, Simon Hughes, all won by-elections. The same thing was said. It'll go back at the general election. It didn't. We can hold the seats once we've got them. But the other point I want to make is about the poll tax. There were 2 aspects of the poll tax, and I believe the second hasn't yet become the political issue it's going to. The first is sorting out the current problem. But when it's sorted out, there's the reckoning for the cost of the poll tax. And Jack mentioned this earlier, and he was right. Come the general election, the voters will, I suspect, be told by Labour as well as by us exactly what the fiasco cost. And it cost a fortune, over £220 million just to set the thing up, the leaflets, the computer programming and whatever. It cost $271 million to collect it in the first year. The transitional relief is already running at over $2,000 million, and that's for England and Wales alone. Now, this is actually a national scandal. This is political failure at an appalling level.
I'm going to interrupt you because your leader's on the line. Mr. Ashdown, good morning.
Good morning, Kate.
Thank you for coming in. I gather you're in a radio car talking to us. But
the wonders of technology.
Is this a flash-in-the-pan result that you've had tonight, as your opponents have been saying here, or do you think the Ribble Valley victory is a constituency you're going to hold on to?
Well, it's a constituency we're going to hold on to, and I think your exit poll showed that. I mean, if at this stage we've got 33% of the vote at the next general election, and that's what predicted, then we will be able to build on that. I should tell you that I think that's rather higher than, for instance, David Velotti got on his exit poll. But you asked me if it's a flash in the pan. No, it's a clear example of the steady progress that's been made by the Liberal Democrats. It confirms that. You see it in local election results. And although it's a stunning example of that, it's a milestone on the road to recovery and a road to a more powerful third force in British politics now clearly established.
Aren't you just being used as a stick with which to beat the government?
Oh, come, David. I mean, I'm not going to be I'm not going to pretend that there isn't an element of protest vote involved in this. Of course there is. There is in any by-election. Goodness knows there's enough to protest about. But the point is that the Liberal Democrats are the people who've been chosen as the vehicle for that. I mean, let me be clear. There are, it seems to me, three winners tonight. The first is the people of Ribble Valley, who now have a very fine Member of Parliament, and my prediction is they'll hang on to him. The second is the people of Britain, who will now get rid of the poll tax. And the third is the Liberal Democrats, who have shown that they can win seats in all corners of our country. And self-evidently, there are two losers. One is the government, on Mr. Major's 100th day. To have lost this 10th safer seat is a blow to the government, and they've got to take the message. But by far and away the biggest losers tonight is the Labour Party. I mean, if in a position where they were within a few points of us, on an issue in the poll tax was the centre of it, in a seat in Lancashire, they can't build themselves into the challengers to the Conservatives. They have no hope of winning the next election, no hope of winning those seats in the south of England that they must win. And it's fascinating to have heard John Cunningham tonight making excuses about this was inevitable. At the end of the campaign, right through the campaign, Labour's leaflets were saying that they were the only people who could beat the Tories, and they've come up with a derisory less than 10%.
Mr. Ashdown, one of the remarkable things about tonight for us was that our exit poll was almost exactly accurate.
Indeed.
When people were asked, as they came out of the polls, how they'd voted, they gave the exact figure that they voted.
Sure.
And when they were asked how they'd vote at the next election, they replied Conservative 47%, Liberal Democrat 33%, and Labour back at 17%, where they were at the last general election in 1987. So it hasn't changed all that much, has it?
Oh, come, David. I mean, you're a political realist. I mean, I think Des Wilson was absolutely right. If that's what they're saying now, from 33% with a 17% Labour vote to swing, with an incumbent MP who will do a first-class job, that's a winning position. I mean, I suspect that that is a better position, for instance, than Alan Beef, who has held his seat for the last, 15 years, would have got on the night of his by-election victory, and almost certainly better than David Bellotti's. I mean, with, what is the 14% span between those two, some of that Tory vote will be eroded when they see the quality of Michael Carr as the incumbent MP, and the 17% of the Labour vote to eat into. I think Ribble Valley is a classic, in many ways, in its demographic makeup, classic potential Liberal constituency, and my prediction is, despite Jack Cunningham's natural protestations to the contrary, that they'll hold on to it.
Paddy Ashdown, congratulations on tonight's result, and thank you very much for coming in and talking to us.
Thank you for asking me.
Bye. Well, now, we must wrap this up now, because it's 2:10 already. I'll give you each a brief word, but I'll first of all, just to stir you up a bit more, John, your reaction to the result overall and prospects for the immediate future.
Well, I suppose you've got to give all the colours to the Liberal Democrats, and a tremendous result for them, and certainly a worry for Labour. We've talked about the problems for the government, perhaps we've not talked enough about the problems for Labour. When the Liberal Democrat, the Centre Party vote went down in the opinion polls, the main beneficiaries of that were Labour. That's one of the reasons why Labour went back up again. Now, you may disagree with that, but I think that's the broad picture. If the Liberal Democrats increase their position, and of course they need by-election success to do that, I think it will hurt Labour. And that's something that Labour will have to worry about. For the government, of course it hurts them in a sort of grand and obvious way, in the ways we've talked about. But I don't think we ought to forget the problem it poses for Labour.
One small reflection. Sort of in the middle of the Falklands War, when again the Conservatives were very popular, there was a by-election in Beaconsfield, politically actually very similar to Ribble Valley. In that by-election, the Conservative votes held almost exactly steady, and a young Labour candidate called Tony Blair came third. This time, politically similar to Beaconsfield, at the end of a war which has been extremely popular with the British electorate, the reaction has been very different. I think, if nothing else, this by-election will hasten the return to a normality that British politics really hasn't seen since before Mrs. Thatcher's resignation. And I think that reality will lead, amongst other things, to the death of any talk of a May or June election.
We must keep it brief. Des Wilson.
Well, I agree with everything that both John and Peter said. It's obviously been a wonderful night for us, and the one point I would really underline is that when people leave their homes, walk down the street, go into a polling booth and put a cross beside a name, they vote Liberal Democrat in increasing numbers. We are a major force in British politics once more, and in terms of my responsibility of organising a general election campaign, this is an enormously encouraging night.
A disappointing night for Labour, but I don't agree with John Sargent. We were third, we've come third. I don't think that anyone really is going to draw too many damaging conclusions about that. I'm disappointed for Josie Farrington, who I think deserved better, but this has been a very tough by-election in a constituency where we've never had a good, sound political face. Of course, it will give a fillip transiently to the Liberal Democrats, and we'll hear a lot about that in the next 48 hours, but other political tests will show that they're not in a position to challenge the Conservatives at the next general election. Only Labour has that position and that opportunity, and we should take it.
Chris Pratt.
It's a disappointing result for the Labour Party. It's a very disappointing result for us. It's a good result, very good result for the Liberal Democrats, but it is a by-election, and it's only a by-election. I predict two things. First of all, that we'll win the seat back at the next general election, and secondly, that we will, as we've said all along, produce the shape of our review of the community charge before the local government elections, because we've been listening to what people have got to say about local government finance even before this by-election result this evening.
Well, we shall all look forward to the result of